All right, so today we're diving into a story that I don't know about you, but it's making waves in college football. But honestly, I think it goes even beyond that.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the Colorado Buffaloes,
Right.
some serious allegations against their program, and then there's this whole legal precedent thing with Prince Harry
Right.
that could really change things for athletes and journalists.
It's really interesting.
It's kind of like watching a legal drama unfold.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to see how sports law and media ethics are all coming together in this one situation. And there's a lot at stake here. And the consequences, they could go way beyond just the University of Colorado.
You bet. I was reading through those articles and watching those videos that you sent me.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, well, let's start with setting the scene, right?
Oh.
So Deion Sanders comes in, better known as Coach Prime. He takes over at CU, and he brings a lot of attention, a lot of excitement with him.
Yeah, he does.
But as you know, not all press is good press.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, some of these publications like Athlon Sports,
Right.
they've been making some pretty serious allegations
Probably,
with
yeah.
anonymous sources, saying that there's locker room violence and that there's a toxic culture within the program.
Yeah. I mean, they're painting a pretty concerning picture, and Coach Prime's not having it.
Yeah.
He's calling these reports straight up lies and even hinted that he might take legal action.
Right.
He went on well-off media, I don't know if you saw that, and vehemently denied everything.
I did see that, yeah. And, it's clear that he thinks that these accusations are hurting the team's image and the players too.
Yeah, their reputations.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. We're going to tie in Prince Harry here, right? So think about his recent victory against Mirror Group newspapers, right? So they were using some pretty shady reporting tactics.
Yeah.
But he won.
He did win, yeah.
And the interesting part is that some of the stuff they printed about him was actually true.
Wait, so you're saying that even if those anonymous sources about the Buffs are telling the truth? Yeah.
The way that they got that information could still be a problem.
That's the thing. That's the takeaway from the Prince Harry case, right? It sets a precedent. It says that outlets, they can be held accountable for how they get the information.
Right.
Not just what they publish.
That's huge. And I'll bet that those CU players, they are paying very close attention.
Yeah.
So is that what you're saying? You're saying that they could follow Prince Harry's playbook and sue?
It's possible, but it's not a sure thing. I mean, it's different here in the U.S.
Okay.
Journalists, they have very strong First Amendment protections, and just the whole legal landscape is different.
Yeah. Proving defamation is a whole different ballgame here.
Totally different. So to win, the players would have to convince a court that the reports are false and that they've been hurt by them.
Right.
And because they're public figures,
Right.
they'd have to prove what's called actual malice.
Okay. That sounds hard to do.
Yeah, it is a high bar. Essentially, they'd have to prove that the journalists knew the information was false or that they just didn't care.
When they published it.
So it's not just about being upset about some bad press.
No.
They'd really have to prove that the journalists messed up.
100%. And that's why defamation cases are so hard to win,
Yeah.
especially for public figures. There's this balance, right? You've got to protect reputations, but you've also got to safeguard freedom of the press.
Right.
It's tricky.
And I imagine those anonymous sources, those make things even more complicated.
Absolutely. Put yourself in the player's shoes.
Yeah.
How do you fight back against accusations when you don't even know who's making them? It's like shadow boxing,
Yeah.
You don't even know where the punches are coming from.
Yeah, you're trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly. So they might have to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Maybe call for an internal investigation to try and unmask those sources.
Okay.
Maybe even demand that the publications, that they name their sources.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's a big risk, but it could be effective.
Yeah, it would be risky.
Legal battles, they're expensive.
Yeah.
They take a lot of time.
Right.
And there's no guarantee that you're going to win.
Right.
Plus, even if they did win,
Yeah.
it might not undo the damage that's already been done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, their reputation might already be.
Yeah, their reputation could be tarnished.
Yeah.
And think about the distraction.
Yeah.
All that time and energy focused on a lawsuit, it could take away from training. It could take away from their performance on the field.
Right. Yeah.
They'd have to weigh all that.
Absolutely.
But let's be real, a lawsuit, it's not their only option.
Right.
Right.
No, they could choose to engage directly with the media, maybe release statements to clarify their side of the story, or even give interviews to journalists that they feel will give them a fair shake.
So they shouldn't just stay silent and hope it goes away.
Sometimes silence can make it look like you're guilty or that you just can't defend yourself.
Right.
So it might be better to take control and try to shape the narrative.
Okay, so this is less about football and more about like PR chess,
Both sides are trying to control the story.
It's a chess match, and the board is social media.
Yeah, and that changes everything because athletes now they have this platform where they can talk directly to fans.
That's right. It's like having their own personal broadcasting network, you know?
Yeah.
They have the power to shape public opinion in a way that they never could before.
Right. But I bet there are drawbacks to that too.
So, of course, it's a double-edged sword. Anything they post, it can be scrutinized, it can be used against them, you know?
Right.
So, venting online is not really a good strategy.
Got it.
They have to be careful about their message, their tone, who they're talking to.
Okay. Yeah. So much pressure for these young athletes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're dealing with training, competition, and now this whole media scrutiny thing.
It's a lot to handle,
Yeah.
especially for those who are just starting out in college, right? They're
Right.
just kids.
Yeah, it makes you think, shouldn't there be a way to prepare them for this?
Absolutely.
Like how to deal with the media, all that stuff.
I think universities and athletic programs, they need to step up and offer more guidance. Like, what if there was a media relations boot camp?
Yeah, I love that. Teach them how to handle tough questions from reporters, how to use social media effectively.
Right. Empower them to control their own stories, to protect their reputations, and make smart choices about their careers.
That would change things, wouldn't it?
Totally. Instead of just reacting defensively when something bad happens, they'd be proactive in shaping the narrative.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm starting to see this whole story in a new light. It's not really athletes versus journalists.
Right.
It's more about finding a way to coexist in this new media world.
It is. You've got it.
We need to respect each other's roles and work together to do things better.
You hit the nail on the head.
Mm-hmm.
And the CU Buff situation, this could be what forces that change to happen. It's a chance to learn from the past, adapt to the present, and shape a better future for both athletes and the media.
It really puts things into perspective, and I think it goes way beyond just a few negative articles. This is about how athletes, the media, and the public all interact in this digital age.
Well said. We're in uncharted territory here, and the rules are still being written. This whole thing, this case, could really change how we deal with these issues in the future.
Definitely a conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely.
Now, before we go into the legal stuff, I want to bring it back to our listeners for a second.
Yeah.
Why should they care about this story?
Well, this case, it's not just about sports. It's about things that affect us all, you know? Freedom of speech, the right to privacy,
Right.
the responsibility of the media.
Yeah.
It asks us to think about how we consume information, how we form our opinions,
Yeah.
and how we hold people in power accountable.
Right. Right. Yeah. It reminds us that we all play a role in shaping the media. We're not just sitting back watching, we're part of it, you know?
We are. We need to be thinking critically, questioning what we see and hear, and we have to demand better from our media outlets.
That makes a lot of sense. But before we get too deep into the media's role, I think it's worth taking a quick look at some past cases about athletes and defamation lawsuits.
Yeah.
Because we can learn a lot from what's happened before, right?
Absolutely. There's this one case that really stands out in my mind, and I think it's super relevant here.
Okay.
Brett Favre's lawsuit against Shannon Sharp.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. What happened there again?
Well, Favre sued Sharp because of things he said on his show about Favre's alleged role in a welfare fraud case.
Oh, wow. So this was about more than just like sports commentary.
Much more. It involves some serious allegations.
Right.
And in the end, the judge dismissed the lawsuit,
Okay.
ruling that Sharp, his comments, they were protected under free speech.
Okay.
And because Favre was a public figure, he had to prove actual malice, which he couldn't do.
So even though the allegations were serious, the court still sided with Sharp.
They did. And it shows how tough it is to win a defamation case, especially when you're talking about opinions. It's a good reminder that there's a big difference between stating a strong opinion and actually lying with the intent to hurt someone.
Right. Yeah. It's about intent.
It is. And that's what courts really focus on.
This is complicated stuff, you know?
It is. It's very nuanced.
Yeah. I can only imagine how stressful it must be for the athletes involved.
Oh, absolutely. It's a challenging and stressful situation for everyone involved.
Right.
And that's exactly why we're talking about it today.
Right.
The more we understand the complexities, the better we'll be able to navigate these situations in the future.
I couldn't agree more. Now, we've looked at some legal precedent. We've talked about the challenges that athletes face.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? What are the options for the CU Buffs and for other college athletes in the same boat?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer. Every situation is unique, but we can definitely explore some possibilities and see what might work best.
Okay, sounds good.
Right.
All right.
You can weigh the pros and cons of
Yeah.
each option.
Yeah. I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got athletes who feel like they're being treated unfairly and journalists who might be facing lawsuits. Feels like the stakes are pretty high.
Definitely high stakes.
Okay.
And, for the CU players, they have some choices to make.
Yeah, okay.
Let's start with the legal route.
Right.
As we said earlier, it's not a sure thing.
Right.
It's a tough road, especially
Yeah.
with those First Amendment protections.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle, for sure.
Yeah, and I imagine they'd have to really think about it,
Yeah.
weigh those benefits against the risks.
Exactly.
Like, how much is it going to
A
cost?
financial burden, yeah.
And what if they lose?
What will it do to their reputation? Will it distract them from the game?
Right, right. Yeah, and they'd be going up against these huge media companies.
Exactly. Huge companies with lots of money and big legal teams.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like David and Goliath.
It is.
So what else can they do?
Well, there are other options if they don't want to sue,
Yeah.
but they still believe the media is being unfair. They could try what's called PR.
Okay.
It's about managing the narrative,
Okay.
putting out statements, holding press conferences, maybe even doing interviews with journalists they trust.
So being more proactive and trying to shape how people see things?
Exactly. It's about being strategic and getting your message out there.
Got it. Okay. But
Yeah.
how do you deal with those anonymous sources?
That's the toughest part.
Yeah.
It's hard to prove you're innocent when you don't even know who's accusing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like trying to fight a ghost.
Right, right. Yeah. So what do they do?
Well, they could go on the offensive,
Okay.
demand that the publications name their sources,
Okay.
or even offer a reward for information.
Whoa, a reward.
Yeah, it's a bold move,
It is.
but it would definitely send a message.
It would.
It might make those sources think twice about talking,
Right.
maybe even encourage other people to come forward.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's risky, but it could work.
It could.
Okay, so the players have some options, but what about the media?
Right. The media plays a big role in all of this, too.
Yeah. Yeah. What's their responsibility here?
It's about journalistic ethics,
Yeah.
the role of the press in a free society.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a tough balance.
It is.
Reporting the news, but also protecting people.
Exactly. You've got to report the news accurately and fairly,
Yeah.
but you can't forget about individual rights.
Right. Yeah. So how do you find that balance? Especially with sensitive information and anonymous sources.
Right. How do you make sure you're not ruining someone's life based on rumors?
Right.
Well, it starts with checking the facts
Okay.
and verifying your sources.
Right. Yeah. But what about those anonymous sources?
That's where things get tricky.
Okay.
You have to use your judgment.
Okay.
Look at the source's history,
Okay.
their biases.
Right.
See if there's any other evidence to back up what they're saying.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is. Journalists have a lot of power.
Right.
They can influence what people think.
Right.
They can affect people's lives.
Yeah.
They have to understand that what they publish can have serious consequences.
It's not just about getting the story out there first anymore.
Right. It's not about being sensational.
Yeah.
It's about being ethical.
Right.
Using your platform to inform people,
Yeah.
to hold those in power accountable,
Right.
but also to protect people's rights and reputations.
I'm starting to get the big picture here, This isn't just a sports story.
No, it's not.
This is about how athletes, the media, and the public all interact in this digital age.
That's it. You nailed it.
And everything's moving so fast.
It is. And that's where things get really interesting when you add social media and NIL deals into the mix.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't forget about those.
No, we can't.
It's a whole new ball game.
It is.
Yeah.
Athletes have these platforms where they can talk directly to their fans.
Right. Yeah.
But it also means they're under a microscope.
Right. Yeah, so it's good and bad.
It is.
Do you remember what happened with Shilo Sanders?
Oh, yeah. Coach Prime's son.
Yeah, the lawyers in his bankruptcy case, they wanted all this information about his NIL deals.
Yeah. Because they were trying to figure out his finances.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy how connected an athlete's image and their money are now.
It really is.
Yeah.
With NIL deals, college athletes are basically mini businesses.
Right.
They have to manage their brand.
Right.
Their online presence is super important.
Right. Yeah, it's not just about what they do on the field anymore.
It's about everything.
Yeah.
Every post, every comment.
Yeah, they have to be so careful.
They do.
So if all this negative press is hurting their NIL deals,
Right.
do they have a stronger case for a lawsuit then?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Because their reputation is directly tied to how much money they can make.
Right. Yeah, so what's being said about them, even if it's not true,
Yeah.
it could affect their bottom line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that could change how the courts see these cases.
Right, right, yeah. But even with all these challenges,
Yeah.
athletes aren't totally powerless, right?
No, they're not. They have options.
Okay.
And one of the most powerful tools they have is social media.
You're right. We talked about the risks,
Yeah.
but it's also a way for them to fight back, to
Exactly.
tell their side of this story.
They can control the narrative.
Yeah, and reach fans who support them.
Absolutely. They can build their brand, show their personality, connect with brands that share their values.
It's like they're building their own media empire.
In a way, they are. But it's not easy.
Right,
They have to be strategic, authentic, and consistent.
right, right. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It is. And maybe we need to do more to prepare young athletes for this.
Yeah.
Teach them how to play the game.
Right.
But what about teaching them how to navigate the world off the field?
Yeah, they need a playbook for that too.
Exactly. They need to know how to build their brand, protect their reputation, and make good decisions online.
Right, right. Yeah, so they're not as vulnerable.
Exactly.
This is starting to make so much sense now.
Good.
But let's go back to the media for a second.
Okay.
We talked about their ethics, but what about the practical challenges they face?
You're right. It's not always easy to get the story right,
Yeah.
especially with everything moving so fast these days.
Right, right. Yeah, everyone's trying to be the first to publish.
It's a race.
Yeah, and that can lead to mistakes.
It does, more often than you think.
Right, and those mistakes can have big consequences.
Absolutely. So how do we fix this?
Yeah, how do we make journalism more responsible?
Well, we need to hold journalists accountable when they mess up,
Okay.
but we also need a culture of transparency within media organizations.
Okay.
High standards for accuracy and fairness.
Right, right. Yeah, what about the readers and viewers?
We have a responsibility too.
Okay.
We can't just believe everything we read.
Right.
We need to be skeptical, question sources, think critically.
So we need to be more active and less passive.
Exactly. And we need to demand better from our media outlets.
Right, right. Yeah, so we all play a role in
think-
making things better.
Absolutely.
I feel like I've learned so much today.
Good, I'm glad.
But I'm sure our listeners are wondering what all of this means for the future.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. So what do you think? What's going to happen?
Well, there's no way to know for sure,
Right.
but we can look at the trends and make some guesses.
Okay. Yeah. What do you see on the horizon?
Well, I think this CU Buffs case
Yeah.
and other cases like it,
Okay.
they're going to force some big changes in sports journalism.
Okay.
Media outlets, they're going to have to be much more careful about what they report,
Okay.
especially when it comes to anonymous sources.
So do you think we're going to see less investigative journalism?
It's possible,
Okay.
but
Hmm.
I think it's more likely that we'll just see more careful reporting.
Okay.
Journalists will double-check their facts,
Oh,
will
yeah.
scrutinize their sources,
Right.
especially when it comes to sensitive stuff.
Right, right. Yeah. So basically more responsible journalism.
Exactly.
That's a good thing. Right.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. It might take longer to get the news,
Maybe.
but at least it'll be more accurate.
That's the trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's worth it.
I think so, too.
Okay. So what about the athletes? How do you think their role will change?
I think they're going to get even better at managing their image,
Okay.
using social media to tell their story.
Right. Right. Yeah. Be more proactive.
Exactly.
So more athletes speaking out.
Absolutely. They'll be more like activists, using their platforms to talk about important issues.
Right.
And they won't be afraid to call out the media if they feel like they're being unfair.
So they'll be playing offense instead of defense.
That's right. And then there are NIL deals.
Right. Right. Yeah. Those are changing everything.
They are, and they're only going to get bigger.
Okay.
As college athletes become more like pros, their brand and their reputation will be tied to how much money they make.
Right. Right. Yeah. So they'll have to protect their image even more.
More than ever. It's not just about winning anymore. It's about building a brand that attracts sponsors.
Right. Right. Yeah. You were saying earlier that athletes might need lawyers as much as they need agents. So do you think we'll see more lawsuits in college sports?
I think it's definitely possible. As the stakes get higher, athletes might be more likely to sue to protect themselves.
Right.
We could see more defamation lawsuits, more fights over NIL contracts, more challenges to the NCAA's rules.
Whoa. So things are about to get really complicated.
Yeah, the legal side of college sports is about to get a lot more complex.
And it's not just the athletes, right?
No, universities, athletic programs, even the media outlets, they'll all have to be careful.
So it's a whole new era.
It is. It's exciting, but it's also uncertain.
Oh,
It'll
boy.
be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
This has been amazing,
Yeah,
I feel like I have a much better understanding of all this now.
I'm glad to hear that. I always enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, me too. And to our listeners, we hope this has given you a lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
Remember, this is just the beginning.
It is.
The relationship between athletes, the media, and the public is always changing.
It is.
And we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
That's right.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, keep those questions coming.
And be sure to join us for our next deep dive.
We'll be here.
Until then, thanks for listening. Okay, so we talked about locker rooms and Prince Harry and social media and the ethics of journalism.
Yeah,
A lot of ground covered.
yeah, we have.
But I think the big question is, where do we go from here? What's next? What does the future hold for all of this? Athletes, the media, the public. It feels like everything is changing so fast.
It is. It really is a big question. And
Yeah.
like you said, everything's moving so fast, it's hard to predict.
Yeah.
But I do think we can look at what's happening now and make some educated guesses about what might be coming.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that. What do you see coming down the road?
Well, I think this whole situation with the CU buffs, and not just them, but some other cases too, it's going to force everyone in sports journalism to kind of take a step back and reevaluate things.
Yeah.
I think media outlets, they're going to be a lot more careful about how they report on things, especially allegations based on anonymous sources.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think we'll see less investigative journalism then?
It's possible, but I think it's more likely that we'll just see a shift towards more verification, more scrutiny of sources, especially when dealing with sensitive topics that could really hurt someone.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically more responsible journalism.
Exactly. It might take a little longer to get the story out there,
You're right.
but at least you can be more confident that the information is accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most people would agree that that's a good trade-off.
It's about quality over speed,
Exactly.
and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what about the athletes? How do you think they fit into all of this going forward?
I think we're going to see them become even more proactive in managing their image and using their platforms to shape the narrative.
Okay, so more athlete activists.
Exactly. More athletes using their voices to speak out on issues they care about and really controlling their own story.
Okay, yeah, and what about NIL deals? How do you think those factor into all of this?
NIL deals are already shaking things up, and I think they're only going to get bigger.
Yeah, I can see that.
As college athletes become more like pros, their earnings are going to be directly tied to their brand and their reputation.
Right, yeah, so protecting that image is going to be super important.
Absolutely. Winning games is still important,
Of course.
but it's not the only thing anymore.
Right.
It's about building a brand that people connect with, a brand that attracts sponsors.
Okay, and you were saying earlier that athletes might need lawyers as much as they need agents.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more common.
So do you think we're going to see even more lawsuits in the future then?
I think it's definitely a possibility. As the stakes get higher, and with all the money involved in NIL deals, athletes might be more likely to take legal action to protect their interests.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We could see more defamation lawsuits, more contract disputes over NIL deals, more legal challenges to NCAA rules.
So it sounds like the world of college sports is about to get a whole lot more complicated.
Oh, it's going to get messy, for sure. And not just for athletes.
Right.
Universities, athletic programs, even media outlets, they're all going to have to be prepared for this new legal landscape.
A new era, you know?
It is a new era. It's exciting and a little bit scary.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive, and I've learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have too.
I hope so. I'm glad you found it insightful.
Yeah, it's been great having you here to break it all down.
It's always a pleasure to talk about this stuff. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we hope this has given you some food for thought, some new perspectives to consider.
Yes.
This is a conversation that we need to keep having. The relationship between athletes, the media, and the public is always changing.
It's dynamic.
Yeah. And we all have a role to play in shaping how it evolves.
We do.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those questions.
Yes, question everything.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, thanks for listening.